I was rinsing breakfast plates when my paramedic son called with sirens under his breath. "Mom, something's not right. We've got Kendall in the rig, multi-car on I-71. She gave me your number." I laughed because fainting felt rude. "Sweetheart, Kendall is upstairs. She just yelled she's rinsing her hair and running to Kroger for lemons." A footstep creaked in the hall. Water roared. The bathroom door opened. A woman in my Kendall's white robe smiled, no teeth. "Running to Kroger," she said. "Lemons." My son dropped his voice so the patient wouldn't hear. "Her license is in my hand, Mom. Kendall Hart, your address, Owen School." Alexa chirped from the kitchen, in Kendall's voice. "Garage door opened. I'm jumping in the shower." I never set that up. 3 things were wrong in my own house. Kendall hates lemons. Kendall hates cilantro, yet my neighbor thanked her for the salsa she finally loved. And the blue tote by the door carried someone else's monogram and a lightning bolt tattoo I'd seen before. I opened a spiral notebook and wrote "Blue tote, lemons, tattoo." By dinner, we would put proof on the table with the biscuits. By bedtime, the house that lied all morning would tell the truth. I'm Evelyn Hart. I'm 66. I write things down. And tonight, we end this at my table. My name is Evelyn Hart. I turned 66 this past February. I wear my wedding ring on a chain around my neck because my Frank's fingers left this world 10 years ago and my knuckles swell in the winter. I greet the early service at St. Mark's on Sundays. I bake casseroles for people who don't know what else to eat when grief swallows their appetite. I raised 2 boys. Liam is a paramedic. Nathan is a contractor who comes home with sawdust tucked into his hair and a tape measure hooked to his belt. His wife is Kendall. Their boy is Owen. He's 8 and he leaves Legos like tiny booby traps for bare feet along my hallway because we've been all living together here while Nathan and Kendall save for a little place up near Polaris where new builds go up every week. I put the phone on the counter and wiped my hands on a dish towel that read, "Bless this mess," which felt like a scripture and a joke in equal measure. I told myself I would go upstairs right now and see Kendall with her hair all foamy, and I would smile about whatever paperwork mix-up or identity mishap had my son think he had his sister-in-law on the back of his rig, and then I would call him back and we would laugh and talk about dinner, and I would stir a pot roast in the slow cooker, and normal would go back to normal. I started up the stairs and then stopped cold. The house was too quiet. You don't know the quiet of your own house isn't right until it shifts by a grain. It was the wrong weight of quiet. It felt staged. "Kendall," I called. "Be right down," sang a voice that could have been hers, light and bright and airy, like a ribbon in a breeze. I kept climbing. Halfway up, the water turned off. A shadow moved behind the frosted glass. The door opened, and a woman in my white robe with the little stitched K on the chest pocket smiled. No teeth. "Running to Kroger," she said. "Lemons." "Lemons?" I repeated, catching on the word like a sweater snagging a nail. "Kendall hates lemons. Citrus gives her headaches," she says. She keeps a bottle of ibuprofen in her makeup drawer for when someone brings lemon bars to church. She tells people politely that she can't. The woman lifted a tote from the chair by the door. The tote was blue with a monogram stitched onto it, RD, and not the worn tan bag with the stitched heart that Kendall uses for groceries. She slipped on sunglasses, though April sky was a pale gray that promised rain. She didn't look me in the eye. The robe swished around her knees as she moved quickly down the steps. "You okay?" I said, not sure what I meant, not sure who I was asking. She didn't answer. The front door opened, let in a ribbon of street noise and the sweet smell of damp earth, and closed. Liam texted me a moment later, admitted to St. Luke's, stable. I can't share more, HIPAA. But Mom, It's her. Outside, the trash truck growled past our driveway. Tuesday, pickup day. The ordinary noise of our little street went on, the buzz of a neighbor's mower, the squeak of a bicycle, the clatter of a dog's paws on the sidewalk. Everything looked fine enough to make you doubt your own name. Alexa chirped from the kitchen, a pleasant, bright intruder. She announced in Kendall's voice, "Garage door opened. I'm jumping in the shower." The sound made the tiny hairs along my arms rise. I didn't even remember setting that up. I went to the kitchen and stood in the doorway and felt the air that still held the echo of the voice. It is a particular kind of fear when your own house talks to you with the voice of someone you love and you don't believe it. I opened the pantry and stared at the canned goods because sometimes you need to look at labels to remember that reality still has edges. I took a pen and a small spiral notebook from the junk drawer and wrote the time in the top corner. 9:18 a.m. Kindle upstairs. Son says Kindle an ambulance. Alexa says shower. Tote, blue, monogram RD. Smell, citrus, not vanilla. Lemons? I made coffee I didn't drink. The mug cooled beside the sink, and I watched the shadow of the maple tree move across the back deck and then across my kitchen floor, stripes on linoleum like the slow passing of a sundial. At 11, my neighbor Donna Parker knocked on the back door with her elbow because her hands were full of a plate of still warm blueberry muffins, and her little dog tugged at his leash like his job meant something. Donna is the kind of neighbor who notices everything and brings over more than anyone asked for. God bless women like her. She said, "I'm returning your plate." And then she leaned closer, the way women do when they want to share something without making it sound like gossip. "Tell Kendall that salsa recipe is gold. I swear the cilantro makes it." "Cilantro?" I said, keeping my voice light, that little notch that isn't quite calm and not quite alarm. "Yes, ma'am. She brought it to my porch last night with a jar of pickled onions and said she finally came around to cilantro." Donna laughed, the sound bright and thick. "I told her she'd see the light." "Cilantro tastes like soap to Kendall. She has said it at every church potluck and every PTA picnic. She scrapes it off tacos like it's a threat." I put my hand flat on the counter behind me, feeling for something solid while my brain hunted for an exit ramp. "I'll tell her," I said. After Donna left, I opened the fridge and read another note. "PTA tonight, 6 p.m. The blocky letters look like someone trying to put each letter in its assigned square. Kendall writes loops in hearts. She dots her I's with little circles. She keeps Post-its in the junk drawer and on the bathroom mirror and on the underside of the cabinet above the coffee maker. And they look like Valentines to future versions of herself. These letters did not. "Owen," I called, because it was almost noon, and lunch meant coaxing a child away from the deep gravity of his Lego army. "Wash up." He came to the kitchen with a little smudge of graphite at the base of his index finger from where he clutches a pencil too tight when he's concentrating. He climbed on the stool at the island and swung his legs and looked at me in that solemn way he gets when he is gathering the courage to say something risky. "Grandma?" "Yes, Bug." He put his palms flat on the island as if he were steadying himself. "Mom called me Buddy this morning." "Buddy?" He nodded. "She never calls me Buddy. I'm her Bug. She said, 'Eat your cereal, Buddy.' And she didn't ruffle my hair like she always does. She used her left hand." I set a plate of peanut butter toast in front of him and held my voice steady. "Your mom might have been tired, love. Everyone gets to be different sometimes." He accepted this because 8-year-olds are brave and forgiving in the ways that matter most. He ate his toast. I put strawberry slices on his plate because he always likes 3 red things. He lined up the strawberries in a little row and then ate them like a parade, one after the other, his fingers sticky and pink. At 12:14, my phone buzzed, a text from Liam. "Discharge likely tonight if imaging holds. She's asking for Nathan." A photo followed, a hospital wristband with Kendall's name and birth date, and a smear of something the color of cheap citrus perfume on the edge of gauze. I went into the den and closed the door and turned the lock because I needed a small circle of quiet where the world could make a little sense. I set my spiral notebook on my lap and wrote out what I knew in patient grandmotherly print. Then I pulled up our Ring app on my phone and scrubbed back through the morning. A woman in a white robe hugged the hallway wall to avoid the camera. She kept her head down. The blue tote with the RD monogram hung off her left shoulder. When she reached to pull the door, the base of her thumb flashed a small lightning bolt tattoo at the base of her thumb. Kendall hates tattoos. She said she never wanted anything she couldn't change her mind about on a Tuesday. My heart did a soft, careful turn inside my chest. I knew exactly one person in Cedar Ridge with a little lightning bolt tattoo at the base of her thumb and the initials RD stitched onto her tote. Her name was Ray Donovan. She used to babysit Owen on Wednesday afternoons when Kendall went to her nail appointments before she decided she couldn't stand the smell anymore. I called my friend Marlene because I needed someone steady, whose feet stay on the ground when other people start floating. She answered with the voice she uses when you know you can tell her anything. "Bean Barn? 10 minutes?" We sat in a corner booth at the Bean Barn with 2 drip coffees that went cold while I told her everything in a low voice. I showed her the ring crib and the photo of the hospital wristband. I told her about lemons and cilantro and the wrong tote and the wrong nickname and Alexa telling me my own house was doing what it was not. Marlene watched the video twice. Then she put her hand over mine. "That's Ray in your robe. I'd stake my grandkids on it." We left Bean Barn and walked into the little strip of shops where our downtown tried on new ideas every 5 years. In the corner next to the hardware store sat Box and Ship, the place where we buy stamps and make copies and notarize the documents that line our lives in official ink. The clerk, a young woman named Gina with a butterfly clip in her hair, looked up and smiled like she remembered my face from last week because she probably did. She said, "Back so soon? Your daughter-in-law ever pick up those copies? The power of—" Her mouth snapped shut like she had caught herself stepping over a line. "What copies?" I said, keeping my voice friendly and curious the way you do when you open a door for someone. She chewed her lip, which is what people do when truth and job security fight in their mouths. She said you knew. A durable power of attorney and a limited guardianship. I notarized signatures. Everything looked in order. She lowered her voice. Her friend with the little lightning tattoo signed as a witness. It's a special kind of cold that slides into your bones when someone uses your family's names next to forms that could empty your accounts or rearrange your decisions or tell the world a story about you that bends your life towards somebody else's convenience. I wrote down the details in my notebook. Box and Ship, Gina, POA, limited guardianship, witness Ray, notary date, last Thursday. "What bank?" I asked softly. She tapped her finger on a stack of leftover carbon copies. "Buckeye Community Credit Union, the kind of place where they still know your name and ask about your mother." My chest hurt like I had been running, though my body was standing still. Marlene and I thanked her, and we walked outside into the sunlight that didn't care about any of this, which felt rude. "Control," Marlene said quietly. "This is about control." On the drive home, the word settled like a heavy blanket. Control. If someone wanted to control the money, the school pickup list, the doctor conversations, the narrative, then they could set routines on smart speakers, stage appearances on hallway cameras, use a decoy model in a robe to trick a house, and go to a motor lodge with a man in a black Escalade who tips in hundreds and calls you by a name you like better when you decide you deserve more than the life you promised to build. I made a U-turn at the next light. Redwood Place apartments crowd up against the backside of the strip where the highway noise constantly hints that other lives are happening very fast just beyond your street. Ray's door was cracked for the spring breeze. I knocked and she nearly shut it until I held up my phone with her tattoo paused on the ring capture. "Please," I said, "don't lie to a grandmother today." Her shoulders fell. She let me in. The apartment smelt like hairspray and microwaved popcorn. There was an open toolbox on the coffee table with bobby pins and zip ties and little bottles of nail glue and a curling wand that looked like a weapon from a sci-fi movie. The white robe with the stitched K hung over a chair like it was tired of lying. The blue tote sat by the couch. Ray sank into a chair and stared at her hands for a long time before she looked up. She said it was easy money. She said you get anxious and this kept you calm. She said to put on the robe and walk past the hallway and maybe say a line or two if I had to. She said an Alexa routine. When the garage opens after noon, it plays I'm Jumping in the Shower. She said she was suffocating at your house and she had a right to a better life than being married to an HVAC guy who smells like plywood. My son, I said, not trusting my voice with 1,000 other things it wanted to say. She said she just needed to take a breath. Ray fiddled with the ring on her finger. She said it wasn't hurting anybody. She gave me cash. She told me we were both helping each other. Where was she? She swallowed. Highland Motor Lodge off 23 with a guy named Graham Whitaker. Black Escalade, fancy watch. He left hundreds on the nightstand to tip housekeeping. She said they're leaving on Friday after she files something at the county courthouse to keep you away from Owen in case you make trouble. She said Owen will adjust. She said, Ray's voice cracked. She said little boys are resilient. I closed my eyes. Sometimes when grief barrels into a room, your body tries to make a small, safe cave behind your eyelids so you can breathe. I didn't know about the hospital, Ray said. I swear. She texted me to show up today and then she stopped answering and I panicked. I am sorry. What time were you in my house? I asked. 10:03? She pointed to the tote. I left my bag by the chair and then I left through the garage. I kept my head down like she said. I sat in the quiet a moment and then did the thing my husband always said I did when the storm hit. I became steady. I stood. You're coming to dinner. Not to eat, to tell the truth. Her eyes widened. She'll do what she's already decided to do. And we're going to do what people do when they are done being lied to. We are going to sit at a table and we are going to put the truth on the table with the food. And we are going to see who can look at it without blinking. That evening, I set the table like a battlefield. White tablecloth, paper napkins, my green bean casserole, rolls wrapped in a towel so they'd stay warm. I lined the sideboard with artifacts like I was a museum docent at a traveling exhibit of our lives. Screenshots printed from the ring, the carbon copies from Box and Ship, a screenshot of the Alexa routine with a little toggle switch glowing blue. A bank alert that had popped through an hour earlier showing a same-day transfer between our family business account and one newly opened in Kendall's name only. Nathan came home first with Owen and a tired smile that reached a little less of his face than usual. He set his tape measure on the counter next to the mail and kissed my cheek and said, "What's the occasion, Mom?" "Family," I said, and something in my voice must have made him look harder at my eyes. He didn't ask the next question. He called to Owen to wash his hands, and then he went to the bathroom sink and scrubbed his own like he was trying to wash the day out of his skin. Kendall walked in last. Her hair was smooth. Her mouth was shiny. She wore a thin sweater the color of those lemons I didn't believe she was going to buy. The same citrus smell from the gauze in Liam's photo walked into the kitchen with her. She saw Ray sitting at the far end of the table beside Marlene and stopped. "What is this?" she said. Her voice tried for breezy and landed on brittle. "Sit," I said softly. "Please." Liam came straight from a late call in his uniform, set his radio on silent, kissed my cheek, and squeezed Owen's shoulder. He didn't take a seat. He stood in the doorway and crossed his arms the way men do when they're trying to take up a little less space than their certainty requires. We bowed our heads for a fast grace that was more plea than thanks, and then I started at the beginning and put each piece down like a layer cake of evidence. Liam's call, the voice from the speaker, the lemons, the tote, the wrong nickname, the cilantro, the tattoo on the thumb, the Ring camera, boxing ship, the bank alert. Kendall laughed, a little sharp sound that would have bothered me years ago and sounded thin now. Are you kidding me? Evelyn, you've always been dramatic. I was in the shower. Ask Owen. Owen picked out a roll. You call me Buddy, he said, voice very small. You never do that. So I changed it up. Can a mom not change a pet name without a tribunal? Ray lifted her chin. Her hand shook. It was me in the robe, she said. It was me. Kendall looked at her, not like you look at a girl you hired to babysit your kid while you lie, but like you look at a mosquito buzzing near your ear. Seriously? Liam cleared his throat. I can't share patient details, but I can say this. I looked a woman in the eyes today who gave me your name and birth date and address and your kid's school and your husband's company and your mother-in-law's phone number without even looking at a card. And if that wasn't you, then someone stole your whole life. Kendall's lips thinned. Nathan turned over the carbon copies in his hands, and I watched the moment he saw what the fine print meant. He set the papers on the table like they were hot. What is this? He asked, voice hoarse with the effort of staying calm. That, Kendall said, is called being an adult. You're never home, bills don't pay themselves, our accounts are scattered, and you act like we still live in your mother's museum and like I'm a guest in it. I'm over it. Graham, she bit off the name, but it hung there in our era like the smell of gasoline at a pump. He sees me. He doesn't come home with splinters and excuses. He doesn't act like my job is to be grateful. Marlene made a soft sound that was half pity and half prayer, and Nathan stood up so quickly his chair skidded back and the dog next door barked like an echo. We built a life with our hands, Kendall. I saved you from a bad landlord. I redid floors until my knee said no, and I put you first at every turn I could find. You used my son and my mother to run a con because a man with a car payment bigger than my mortgage smiled at you in a lobby? Get out. We're done. Kendall's eyes went hard and wild at the same time. Don't threaten me, she said. I have papers. He picked up the carbon copies and tore them gently into 4 neat pieces. Not anymore. She looked at each of us then, searching for soft landings and finding none. She snatched her purse off the chair and moved toward the door, citrus burning the back of my throat as she passed me. At the threshold, she turned back. One last shot like a parting bullet. You think you won, old woman? You won't always be there when doors open and Alexa talks. Maybe not. But now every door has a camera and every lie has a timestamp. She left. The door closed with the kind of quiet that follows a slam door and stings more. We ate the meal I had made like people eat after funerals, slow and quiet, and because you have to. Owen crawled into my lap and cried in little hiccuping sobs that made my shirt wet. Nathan stared at his hands like he didn't know what they were supposed to do next. Liam finally sat down and rubbed his eyes with his thumb and forefinger. Ray whispered, "I'm sorry," so many times her mouth ran out of words and only tears were left. Marlene collected plates with the gentleness you reserve for newborns and breakables, and she filled water glasses and folded napkins and said not one thing that could have made any of it worse. The next morning, I made a list and started making calls.
Buckeye Community Credit Union, Cedar Ridge Elementary, Franklin County Domestic Relations Court. The box and ship notary stamped my copy of the carbon duplicates and logged an affidavit. The bank manager assured Nathan that transfers initiated under fraudulent pretenses could be flagged and reversed. The school updated pickup lists and passwords. My friend Diane from church recommended an attorney who wore flats and kindness and who listened to each of us as if the story we were telling her was not something she already knew how to untangle, but something precious we had carried into her office. I changed the Wi-Fi password. I turned off the Alexa routine, and the house exhaled with me. I printed the ring stills and slid them into a manila folder with tabs like I used to do when the boys brought home science fair projects and I knew order could make anything a little less frightening. A week later, we sat on a bench outside courtroom 4B, where the county seal gleamed above a door that has seen everything that can happen to families. Nathan wore the one suit he owns that doesn't still smell like polyurethane. Owen sat between us, drawing a knight with 2 big feet and a sword that looked like a popsicle stick. William sat on the end with a coffee he wasn't supposed to bring, the lid tucked back, the steam making a little ghost. Kendall didn't show. Her attorney filed something the next day that we answered 2 days after that with our own pile of papers. The judge signed a temporary order granting Nathan sole custody and restricting emergency pickups to a list of 3: Nathan, me, and Liam. The clerk stamped our copies with a heavy thunk that sounded like sanity returning in increments. Donna told me later that someone saw a black Escalade pull onto the highway toward Chicago that Friday afternoon. A woman in a yellow sweater was in the passenger seat. She didn't look out the window. She looked down at her phone the whole time. We had to start over in all the little ways people don't talk about at potlucks. I cleared Kendall's things from the bathroom and folded them into boxes and put them on the bed in the guest room that used to be the boys' room and now looks like a museum of their childhood. I found the vanilla body spray and smelled it once and then threw it away because grief doesn't need souvenirs. I checked the back door 3 times the first night and then made myself only check it twice and then only once and then finally just put my hand on the lock and walked to bed. Ray came by with foil pans of baked ziti that fed us 3 nights, and she sat with Owen at the island and did spelling words and never once called him Buddy. She called him Bug, the way his mother used to before she decided she wanted to be someone else's story. Ray opened a little line of credit with Buckeye and let me help her make a budget the way someone helped me when Frank died and the checkbook looked like a foreign language. She started picking up extra hours at the salon and saved for the little gray hatchback she circled in the classifieds with a red pen like Hope had ink. Nathan started sleeping again somewhere around the 3rd week. It came back in pieces, like birds testing a feeder after a storm. He went to the job site in the morning and came home dusty and tired and told me what he had built with his hands that day. He let me put a plate in front of him and didn't protest when I put another one there an hour later because grief takes a body's hunger hostage and you have to keep offering food like you're laying down a trail in the woods. One Tuesday, I passed Highland Motor Lodge when I took the long way to St. Mark's to drop off brownies for the youth group. The parking lot was almost empty, and the sign had a burned-out letter, so it read HIGLANN Motor Lodge, which felt fitting, a little bit less than it claimed to be. I drove slow past the blacktop and looked at the row of doors and thought about all the stories we don't tell about how people leave each other. In May, at the Cedar Ridge Spring Social, Owen won 2nd place in the chalk art contest for a drawing of a knight fighting a dragon with a popsicle stick sword. He told the judges the dragon was a bad feeling that tries to make you lie to your grandma. They gave him an extra ticket to the dunk tank, and he aimed at the bullseye and sent the math teacher into the water in one throw. He laughed like laughter hadn't forgotten his voice. That night, after we'd hosed chalk off small elbows and said goodnight to Marlene and Donna on the sidewalk, I sat on the porch while the neighborhood put itself to bed. The maple leaves whispered to each other. A moth did a gentle, clumsy dance under the porch light. Nathan came out with 2 mugs of tea and handed me one, like we had done it 1,000 times. Because we had.
Do you ever wonder if you overreacted? He asked, a smile in his voice to soften the words. No, I said. And we both laughed, and then we stopped laughing and sat with the quiet a minute. He turned his mug in his hands. I want to be angry forever, he said. I want to say fancy words about betrayal and control and use them like armor and never feel anything soft again. He shook his head, but then I see Owen with a book and a sticky popsicle mouth, and I remember that soft is where the light gets in. Frank used to say that, I said. He used to say soft is how we survive. Nathan looked at the street then, the way men look at something far enough away that it could be the future. I don't know what my life is going to look like without that version I kept trying to build. But I know this. We are okay. We are okay because you wrote things down when the house told you a lie. We are okay because you believed your own eyes. He squeezed my shoulder and went back inside. The next morning, I found a small envelope on the kitchen counter with my name written in careful, tentative print. Inside was a note from Ray. "Thank you for not letting me be the worst thing I did," she wrote. "If you need a Wednesday, I'm here." I tucked the note under a magnet on the fridge next to Owen's night and a flyer for the church rummage sale and the DMV renewal reminder. Because sometimes the things that keep families together look like little slips of paper with the ordinary promises people make each other. A month later, the court set a final hearing date. Kendall didn't contest the custody order. Our attorney said words like equitable distribution and marital assets and abandonment. She handed me copies with the courthouse stamp that felt like heavy proof that our lives were being witnessed by something larger than papers. We walked back to the parking lot in bright noon, and the asphalt shimmered like a mirage. Liam had a late shift and promised to swing by with dinner after. Nathan squeezed my hand. His hands are so big and warm that even now I still feel like the little person. And he said, "Let's go home." Home was a clean kitchen and the rosemary plant on the windowsill and the sound of a cartoon drifting from the living room because Owen had earned 30 minutes by doing his reading without a fuss. Home was stacked mail and shoes by the door and the hum of the air conditioning. Home was vanilla body spray gone and citrus in the trash and the smart speaker silent unless we asked it for the weather. In August, we added a little ritual to our evenings. After dinner, Owen and I went for a short walk down to the corner where the community bulletin board hangs under a little shingled roof. We looked at the flyers. Someone was selling a lawnmower. The high school theater was auditioning for a musical. St. Luke's was having a blood drive. I would tell Owen the stories imaginary people wrote for those imaginary events, and he would add details that made them better. We stood there one evening, while the sky moaned itself purple and pink, and we read a flyer about a community safety seminar at the library about home tech and privacy. I laughed under my breath, and then I didn't laugh at all. I said, "We're going." We sat in a library meeting room on stackable chairs with 3 other older couples and a young woman who asked all the right questions. A man from the sheriff's office explained passwords and routines and how you can get your smart devices to stop eavesdropping without becoming a person who lives in a bunker. He showed us how to turn off drop-in features and change pickup passwords at school. He said the phrase digital paper trail, and I wrote it down and underlined it twice. On the way home, Owen swung my hand. "Are we safer now?" he asked. "We're wiser now, and wiser makes safer." That fall, we cleaned out the garage. We found a box of old Halloween costumes and a bag of pine cones that had seemed like a craft idea once and were now a mouse hotel. We swept and put up shelves and gave ourselves the gift of hooks for coats because Ohio winters deserve hooks. Ray came by with hot chocolate and watched Owen ride his scooter up and down the driveway while Nathan hung the last shelf. She thanked us for writing her a reference letter. She got a job at a salon on High Street. She started wearing a little analog watch instead of checking her phone every 12 seconds. Peace looks different on everyone. Just before Thanksgiving, a letter arrived from a Chicago address with Kendall's name on the return address in a script I recognized as hers.
My palms sweated like I was holding a fragile bird. I put the letter on the counter and looked at it for a long time. Then I opened it because fear doesn't get to decide which truths you read. The letter was 3 paragraphs long, and it told me her version of everything. She said I was controlling. She said Nathan was absent. She said Owen would forgive her when he was grown. She said Graham would marry her. She asked for photographs of Owen. She did not ask about Thanksgiving. I put the letter back in the envelope. I made a copy for the manila folder marked court, along with the little note I wrote myself in my steady grandmotherly hand, "Don't answer without counsel." I gave the letter to our attorney, who suggested we send a copy to the sheriff's office for the file that had become the box I never wanted. I cooked a turkey. I set out plates from my boys and my grandson and my friend Marlene and had Ray sit at the table instead of in the doorway like she always thought she should. We said grace and thanked God for truth that shows up even when you begged it not to, and for the ordinary gift of heavy proof that keeps families from being stolen.
On Christmas Eve, after church, after silent night, under candlelight in a sanctuary that smelled like wax and evergreen and girls' shampoo, after Liam kissed my cheek and told me to go to bed even though I wanted to stay up with the lights, I went to the porch with a mug of tea. The breath I breathed out looked like a small cloud. The street lay quiet. Somewhere, a father wrestled a bicycle out of a box and cursed and then apologized. I smiled at the thought, and then closed my eyes and let the night sit with me. Sometimes control looks like a shower that talks on schedule. Sometimes betrayal smells like citrus when you've known vanilla for years. Sometimes courage is as small and as large as a grandmother with a notebook. Sometimes writing down that the tote was blue and the letter shapes were wrong is enough to start saving the rest of your life. If you're hearing this and something in your house almost makes sense, write it down. Trust your eyes and your nose and that small ache in your gut that tells you a story is not being told correctly. Ask a neighbor. Go to the little shop with the notary. Pull the footage. Tell the truth at the table with the food. You don't need to be perfect to be brave. You only need to be tired of being told that the sound you heard wasn't a sound at all. Winter dropped her long white shawl over Cedar Ridge. We bought rock salt and new gloves. Nathan got the flu and then got better and then mowed his way through January with a cough that wouldn't quit and a determination that made me wish joy came as easily as work. Owen lost a tooth and put it in a sandwich bag, Tooth Fairy Bank's love. He wrote a note that said, "Please don't take my Lego guy," and the Tooth Fairy did not. In February, I started sewing again. I pulled fabric from a bin under my bed and made a crooked quilt from scraps of old shirts and dresses and the curtains from the dining room we had before Frank talked me into the ones I have now. I tied each corner with red thread like little knots that say, "This is staying." Owen lay on the floor and helped me plan the pattern. He made one square all blue and called it "The Sky You See When You're Brave." I put that square in the middle. In March, I bound the edges and took a picture and texted it to Liam, who wrote back the little heart because men who run into pain all day know exactly which things deserve softness. In April, right around the anniversary of the morning my son called me from the freeway with a truth that sounded like a prank, I baked a lemon cake and set it on the counter and looked at it like a little experiment. I cut a slice and sat at the table and took one bite and laughed, because life is a generous comedian when it wants to be. My head didn't hurt. I wrapped a piece for Donna and took it across the street. She put her hand on my cheek and said, "Look at you," like I had grown a new limb. A week later, the mail brought a thick envelope with the county seal. The divorce papers were final. The judge wrote her cursive like a woman who knows what she is saying. Nathan read each page and then folded the papers and set them in the file box and closed it with a snap like a book that finally knows its ending. He looked at me, eyes wet in the corners, and said, "Okay." Spring crept into summer.
Owen learned to ride his bike in a straight line and then to turn and then to go fast and then to stop without making me feel like I was auditioning for a heart medication commercial. Ray bought the gray hatchback and texted me a photo of her keys on her palm like a prize. Liam got promoted to shift lead and used phrases like protocols and capacity, and I pretended I still didn't picture his baby head every time he said anything brave. On a rainy Thursday in July, I was standing at the kitchen sink again, rinsing plates in warm water, when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, and then I did because I am the kind of person who answers. It was Kendall. The line was too quiet. I could hear a television down the hall and a humming air conditioner and a voice that sounded not unlike my own when I have cried too long. "She heard you made lemon cake," she said. "I did," I said. She made a small sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob, pressed so thin it was almost silent. "Graham left. He said I cost too much and smiled too little." There was a ragged breath. "I wanted to be mad at you for making Nathan so steady, for making Owen love the smell of vanilla because you wore it when he was tiny, for making a house that feels like the kind of place a person should want to run toward. I wanted to be mad at you because I thought if your house wasn't so safe, mine wouldn't feel so dangerous to leave." The quiet stretched until it thinned. "Tell Owen I love him," she said. "Tell him I will be better someday." "I will."
We mark our lives with these ordinary moments. The first time you trust your eyes more than someone else's voice. The morning you turn off a smart speaker and the house feels like it went from theater to home. The meal where truth sits next to the biscuits. The afternoon when your grandson finally calls himself a knight out loud because he has a bug he loves, and a grandma with a spiral notebook and a house that tells the truth. On the last evening of that summer, we had a cookout. Liam brought thick burgers and corn on the cob he swore tasted like the 4th of July. Marlene made her pasta salad with the olives Owen picks out and taps on the edge of his plate for me to eat. Donna came with lemonade and stories. Ray arrived late, hair in a messy bun, cheeks flushed from the salon. Nathan stood at the grill like a man who knows how to keep fire from getting ideas. The maple threw shade over the whole yard like a blessing. After dinner, Owen asked if we could play his new game. He had made cards with our names and little things we always say. The cards had tiny drawings. Liam's had a siren, Nathan's had a tape measure, mine had a mug, Ray's had a curling iron. We had to match the person with their phrase. When he flipped over mine, it said, "Write it down, darling." We all laughed because we have lived that sentence for a year. I kissed the top of his head and folded my hands in my lap and looked around the yard at the people who made my life a life. People who had cried in my kitchen and told the truth at my table and changed passwords and routines and routes so we could keep living. If you are listening to this with a tight chest and a head full of almost, here is the soft permission you might need. Write it down. The time, the smell, the neighbor who noticed cilantro, the nickname that didn't fit, the tote with the wrong monogram, the way a voice echo feels wrong in your bones. You don't have to be a detective to be your family's witness. You don't have to be a lawyer to ask a notary to stamp a copy. You don't have to be a hero to call your friend for coffee at the Bean Barn and say, "Watch this video with me and tell me I'm not crazy." Control thrives in confusion. Truth thrives in daylight. Find the light switch and flip it. I am Evelyn. I am a mother and a grandmother and a woman who makes casseroles and writes things. 1 year ago, my son called me from the freeway and told me my daughter-in-law was in the back of his ambulance while my house told me she was in the shower. Today, my house is quiet unless we ask it to tell us the weather. My table holds food and proof and laughter. My grandson calls himself Bug. My son sleeps. My heart is not fearless. It is faithful.
If this story reached you in a kitchen like mine, with a window over the sink and a maple shedding itself in a way you almost don't notice until it's spring again, tell me where you're listening from. Sometimes saying your city name out loud is the first brave thing you do. Sometimes hearing that there's a woman in Cedar Ridge, Ohio, who turned off a routine and turned on her eyes is enough. The names and some details have been changed, not to hide what we did wrong, but to protect who we're still becoming. If you need permission to take notes in your own house and say what is true, let this be that permission. If you need a stranger to tell you that you're not crazy for hearing a shower that wasn't a shower at all, let this be that stranger. And if you need to know that the world keeps spinning after the door slams and the citrus burns your throat, sit with me a minute longer. The maple still throws shade. The porch light still draws moss. The ring from my husband's hand still warms against my chest. We are okay.